Hey everyone, Chance here from Chance and Penner. Here to talk about a little movie. First of all, doing a solo movie review of the recent DC release, The Flash. Now, this movie's on everybody's lips. Everybody's talking about it, and not necessarily for the best reasons. And while I have to say I agree with a lot of those reasons why people didn't like this movie, I didn't feel like I hated it as bad as some people did, but I didn't like it as much as some of the marketing and some of the people telling us this is the greatest comic book movie of all time. It is not. A lot of hype around this movie. You know, this movie's been, man, coming out for like what's felt like the last 3 to 4 years. It was announced in 2014. So almost, 10 years since the original announcement of this movie. And since then, there's just been a bunch of stuff holding it back. But a lot of hype around this movie, I think mainly for the return of Michael Keaton as Batman from the original Tim Burton Batman movie. And, I was excited for it for that reason. I like probably Michael Keaton more than I even really like the original Tim Burton Batman. And he's great in this movie. So at least that was, paid off. And my expectations were met with that, even though he didn't really get a lot to do, even though his character was kind of a non sequitur of this movie. It wasn't really necessary, didn't really add much to it other than the nostalgia factor, which I suspect, is why he was in there and is all, kind of a double-edged sword because it's cool, but at the same time, it's kind of a bummer because it amounts to, a little more than stunt casting. But some great fight sequences from Batman. The CG in this movie really is egregious, and I really struggled. I thought the first part of this movie was really, really bad. There's a sequence in the opening of Barry Allen saving a bunch of babies from a building that was coming down, and they were falling out of the windows, and he had to, use his time force or speed force abilities to get them to safety. Cool idea. The execution was awful. My first comment coming out of the movie to my brother-in-law was, wow, it looked like there was PS2 level graphics in that movie. And I stand by that. Some of the stuff in here is just really terrible. Stuff that, bad CG in ways that I didn't even think they didn't even really need to use CG. A lot of face swap, where with the two Barry Allens, you have the main timeline Barry Allen, and then you had the alt timeline Barry Allen, the Barry Allen that came from Michael Keaton Batman's timeline. And while the juxtaposition of the two characters, I think worked towards the end, it's a struggle. And Ezra Miller's performance is a bit of a struggle as well. I don't know that Ezra has the ability to kind of carry those two characters. Not many people do. It becomes kind of obnoxious at a certain point. The movie's way too long. I felt like you could have knocked off easy a half hour, probably 45 minutes of this movie. But like I said, I felt like the second half becomes a lot more fun. Basically, when Batman enters the pictures, which I don't think happens until like the first 40 minutes, which is tough because when you're going into the movie expecting to see more and he doesn't show up for 40 minutes, it's tough. And that puts a lot on Ezra Miller and his performance. And there were elements where that worked and other elements where that didn't work. There is some heart to be found in this movie that I think is capitalized on towards the end, towards this, second and third act. But yeah, the CG, it's hard to get around the movie. The plot was lacking as well. Michael Shannon, the guy who played Zod. I don't know why Zod was in this movie. I guess Zod was the big bad of the movie and he was the main antagonist, but man, it didn't feel that way. And everybody just kind of seemed to be bored. And I suspect that there was a lot of reshoots in this movie that really affected it negatively. This movie feels like the culmination of the end of something, and I think the end of it being, the way that comic book movies in the past 10, 10 years, I'll say, have been delivered to the audience either by Marvel or DC. I feel like this movie kind of culminates in both of those studios because Marvel, as of late, has been releasing some stuff that is, just in terms of critical, has been lacking in critical praise, which that doesn't matter, but it's also been lacking in audience reaction and audience scores. If you look at a lot of this stuff on Rotten Tomatoes, the critical, the critical reviews are one thing, but the audience reviews, to me, hold a lot more weight because that really tells you what the audience thinks of the movie. But this one, boy, man, I don't know. But it feels like, it almost feels like the JFK assassination of comic book movies where it's the end of the Camelot. You know, it's the end of the era of comic book movies coming out and people being excited. A lot of these are just exhausting now and doesn't leave you a lot to look forward to. You know, like I said, this movie's it's inconsequential to the overall, DC universe. And I don't know why, after watching this, is like the whole thing with James Gunn coming out and announcing the new DCU slate and his new DCU, and why he would come out and release all that while you still had three movies in the can from the old DCU. I don't know, but this movie really feels like the end. It feels like the end of comic book movies being um, the forefront of pop culture entertainment. Unless there's something drastic that happens, and maybe there is. Maybe from Marvel and DC, maybe the James Gunn soft reboot will do a lot for it, and it'll be more cohesive, and it'll build a saga in the way that the first from Iron Man to Endgame basically provided from the MCU. So not a fan of this movie overall. I think if it's one of those movies, if it's on HBO Max, worth a watch, worth a critical watch. But nothing really coming from this movie that gets me excited about the future of comic book movies. And yeah, there's a lot to be desired from this movie. And I hope that because of such a low box office, that the studios understand, like, you gotta make sure your CG, you gotta make sure all facets of the film are presentable and are respectful of the audience. And this constant butchering of films where you have these massive reshoots that completely change the narrative of a movie or the ending of a movie or whatever the case may be. And I'm not even getting into the Ezra Miller of it all and the legal woes. That's one thing, and I think that probably contributed a lot to people not wanting to come out and support this movie. From my end, there's a lot of people that work on the movie other than the star of it, and hundreds of people that put in a lot of work. But it just felt like there was a lot of studio intervention. Felt a lot like the cohesiveness of this movie was left on the cutting room floor. And there are bones in this movie that felt like it could have been a cool idea and cool movie. Also, multiverse is done. Let's stop with the multiverse. We get it. We know what it is. We know that all these movies have to reference Back to the Future, and we're gonna pull all these nostalgic movies or all these nostalgic characters from different eras of movies. Um, but I think we're past that. I think we get it. I think we understand it, and I don't think we really need it anymore. I think we need straightforward movies that thread, different genres of the same comic book movie into one cohesive story, and I don't feel like we're getting that anymore. So, I don't know. Hopefully this is a turning point for comic book movies and blockbuster movies, and hopefully things get better from here. If in traditional Chance and Penner fashion, if I was to give this a score, I would probably give this movie a 4 out of 10. I'd give it a 40%. Like I said, there's a lot left to be desired. So take that as you will. Don't listen to me. Go see the movie if you think I'm wrong, or wait for it to come out. But yeah, interesting time in film, interesting time in the comic book movie genre, and hopefully it gets together.